Welcome to Hot Topics After Dark with the inspired muse himself, leadership coach and author Jeffrey Deshawn. Let's get talking.
Hello, fams, faves, likes, and loves, and those souls I have yet to meet. This is Jeffrey Deshawn, the inspired muse, and I am here for another episode of Hot Topics After Dark. As you can see, we have a guest with us today. I'm really excited about this conversation. We have at-large City Council candidate Chander Jayaraman. Did I get the last name right?
Yep,
Jayaraman. Jayaraman with us. Chander is running for City Council, at-large City Council member seat in Washington, D.C., which is where I live. And I'm excited to have this conversation with Chander today because not only we look at the 2020 election, we know what's happening at the national level with the presidential election, conversations down ballot at our for Congress and for Senate. But across the country, I think more and more people are starting to recognize, if they haven't, particularly with the COVID epidemic and all the economic issues, that what is happening in our local state houses and in our local city councils is almost just as important, if it's not more important, given sort of the disconnect and I say the lack of leadership at the federal level. And so I'm excited to have you with us today, Chander, because for me, you represent one of the folks from community who have been doing work in community and who, from my lens, have said, you know what, now it's time for me to run, to offer myself to service. We met back when I had the honor to work in the mayor's office here in the District of Columbia, former mayor of DC, Vincent C. Gray, as the district's chief service officer. And I was funding and supporting AmeriCorps programs and volunteerism in the city, which included emergency preparedness. And at the time, particularly focused on how we engage young people and prepare young people in the city to be responders, right? Not part of the problem, but the solution. And you were one of the folks from the community level as an advisory neighborhood commissioner, a local elected opportunity we have in the district. I'll let Chander explain more about that. Who not only from your position as a community person, but then also through your business, offered yourself to support young people in the district, learning about emergency preparedness, volunteerism as a pathway to employment and safety. And you've done lots of things like that. And now here you are offering yourself to service as an elected official for City Council. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you and introduce you to some folks that may not know about you and say, why have you been doing this for the last 10, 15 years, however long? It's been more than that, really, I feel like. And then now, why run? We need folks like you to run, which I'm excited about. But what should other folks who may be thinking about running, who've been like you, who've been volunteering community, leading efforts, who may be sort of like, I should, it's my time, but maybe hesitant. Maybe, and also you might have some gems for them as well. So that's my introduction. Chander, why are you doing all the goodness that you're doing? Why should more folks join in? What's happening in the district? Let's talk.
Well, let me give you a little background. I was actually born in India. And so when I was 10 years old, my mom and dad packed all us up from India and moved us to this country to provide better opportunities, in education and much broader variety of opportunities for us than would have been possible there. And so we moved to Kansas and then had an opportunity to move to DC 25 years ago. So I took it. I said, I was born in Bangalore, which is a huge bustling city. And so being in Kansas just didn't really fit me. So I got to go to the big city. So I came to the big city. But around when I was 19, I was in a really bad car accident with my friend. My friend was driving. He fell asleep behind the wheel and rolled the car going from St. Louis back to Lawrence, Kansas after a rowing regatta, which I had been in. And so I was spared. I basically walked away that day in the hospital. But yeah, so I was trying to think, well, why was I spared? What was it about me? And kind of really inspired me to figure out what was my purpose in this life. And it occurred to me fairly soon after that, I was reading more, that, that it was to help people. That was my calling in life. And as much as my parents had done for me, it was time for me to pay it forward. And so when I came here, I thought, well, maybe it's in Congress. I'm supposed to help that. And I didn't like how that was going because it was a lot of backstabbing. So it's like, that's not it. So what did though is I landed at the Latin American Youth Center. Boy, that really changed my life. And that's where they had a program called Youth Build. It was for young people who dropped out of high school or were about to be court involved. And so either I would recruit them saying, hey, you haven't finished your high school degree, come get your GED and some skills. Or we'd write to the judges and say, hey, can you send them over here? Give us a chance. Give the kid a second chance. Let them give us a chance to work with that person. So they would. And so we'd help them get their GED. But then also at the time, this was like in the late 90s, we would give them job skills in the field of construction. They would actually take a building, gut it, and learn how to do demolition, rough carpentry, plastering, putting up sheetrock, all of it. And so that beyond that, we also worked with some of the construction industry folks and said, they're ahead of the game. They've got their GED, they've got skills. So they would kind of jump the line with other young people who are trying to enter the field as apprentices because you had those skills. And so that really provided them with an alternate path instead of being on the street, because they knew, they would tell us that, look, if I keep going the way I'm doing and hustling, I'm either going to end up dead or I'm going to end up in jail. Mm-hmm. And so that really struck me, that really inspired me. I loved it. And I've still, there's some of the folks I still talk to today, and even my old teachers I talk to today. And it really changed my life and changed the trajectory of where I was supposed to go. Mm. And soon after that, I went to work for a small nonprofit. That's kind of how I got into disability and preparedness, because they were in the field of emergency preparedness. Well, actually, take that back. They weren't emergency, they were in the disability field. Mm. So I did a lot of training on self-advocacy and how businesses should hire people with disabilities and the advantages, and break down some of the stereotypes about that people with disabilities can't work. And but around that time, Katrina happened, and we knew there was a bunch of seniors in New Orleans that perished because their organization didn't execute their evacuation plan. So we started looking around the district and around the region, and people with disabilities were just tagged on, and so there wasn't a concrete plan for people with disabilities. So we got into disability preparedness. And, for me as an elected ANC commissioner, how I got into it was that I never saw my representative. We're friends now, but at the time I didn't see him. So I didn't know what was happening. And I'd been involved in student government in college. So this was a natural step. And I said, I need to learn more. I need to get involved more and figure out how all this stuff works. So I got elected to the ANC. And boy, it's been an amazing learning opportunity. Everything from.
Tell us what the ANC Advisory Neighborhood Commission is for those who aren't familiar with it.
Okay, sure. The best way I describe it is if you're in a state and you've got the governors to the mayor, the state senate is to the city council, state house is to the ANC commissioners. We are at the very local level. We represent about 2,000 households in the city, in a small little part of the city. And we run every 2 years. It's a volunteer, so there's no pay to it. And then in a particular area, like in my instance, it's the south part of Capitol Hill, and it's ANC 6B. And there's 10 representatives. We meet monthly, and we vote on things. Like I said, we have a historic area. Somebody wants to build a third-story addition. Or a couple of controversies right now, an organization wants to bring sports betting onto Pennsylvania Avenue, and neighbors are not happy with that. And so I do the alcohol beverage. There's that. There's transportation issues we work on. So a broad variety of things that we have a say in. So when the commission votes, what happens is we send a letter to the city agency. And when the District of Columbia Charter was formed, they created the ANCs, and they gave them the term's called great weight. So the opinions of a commission that are transmitted and officially voted on and sent to an agency get special preference or special weight, called great weight. And what that means, they have to not only respond that we received it and they acknowledge it, but if they choose to not go along with the opinions of the commission, they have to respond to us directly and succinctly with why they decided to make another decision. Mm-hmm. Again, one of the keywords is advisory. We only advise, but they have a responsibility as elected officials too.
Wow. So,
Yeah.
When I listening to sort of your history and how you arrived at this place and running and sort of, that role of the advisory neighborhood commission, it really sort of validates and goes back to when I think about, at this time, public servants and the experience, right? And the perspective that I, as a resident of Washington, D.C. and a voter, hope that my elected officials have had. I heard, you have identified core issues that are problems in the community, the disabled community, access to workforce and development, public safety. You've had the opportunity to engage with local body leaders to then inform the city council members, the city council around that legislation and through that process, and been doing it from a local grassroots community, perspective, having gathered the information, been working with folks, and now, hey, you guys up in legislature, this needs to happen. And so for me, that should be the pathway, right? That should be the feeder to our legislative bodies more and more. What do you have to say? What has gotten you to this place where you recognize the work that you've done, sort of the current landscape in Washington, D.C. that said, I'm going to run and offer myself because I know that I'm positioned to help lead and support my community? Like what got you there? What was the decision for you?
For me, it was the fact that I had practical hands-on experience. There's no better teacher than experience, than actually having done it. Right. So, and that's what can translate into good policy, where you not only can write a piece of legislation and think through like what might be the intended benefits or consequences, but then actually living through that and saying, okay, well, that doesn't quite work that way in the real world. And so that's one of the things I brought, my experiences taught me. And another thing is, as an ANC commissioner, you're not a party. You are neutral. You're no party. And that's actually a good thing. And so you separate out the party politics and really focus on what people want. How do I make people's lives better? And it could be as simple as a stop sign. It could be as complicated as a whole alley or a variety of other things. But that's a kind of practical hands-on experience that really motivated me to take this next step, which is, I'm a small business owner. I do immersive preparedness. And so that was, with COVID, that was really, I didn't expect it when I started all this, but it was a natural fit for my talents. And as a small business owner, I know how COVID impacted me, and I'm helping small businesses now. I'm also an OSCE certified trainer. So childcare centers got shut down. They're starting to reopen. Well, how do you keep kids safe? Well, I do that. I do training for childcare centers on how they take the guidelines and apply it on a practical way on a day-to-day basis. So those are the kinds of things that I think are very important in perspective. And what often happens, at least in the slate of candidates, is, I'm not talking about everybody, but some candidates, they've only worked in policy. So they've been in the Wilson building and they've built up, or they've worked for the agency, so they know the inside game. But not always what people are talking about, what's most important to people. And I think that's where we need to focus on. And that's what I did as an ANC commissioner. So that's my perspective in terms of why I decided to run for the at-large seat.
And it excites me. I mean, I've sort of, not to be redundant, but when I think about the motivation and inspiration, and as a coach, I work with leaders around motivation and inspiration. And that's kind of what I go to first. What is your inspiration and your motivation? Because information and knowledge, we can add in, you can hire well, you're never going to know everything. So you're going to have to build those other resources and teams needed. But your inspiration and motivation for why you're serving and who you're serving, I think, is the biggest indicator as to how leaders will adapt in elected office around decisions, because we don't know. Nobody knew COVID was coming, right? But when you have a lens of a person's inspiration and motivation truly being connected to community and a history of that, you kind of have a level of trust to believe that they're going to engage you in the process. And that's what I hear about your history. When you have someone like you who's had a history of engaging community, working with folks to deliver results and ultimately improve the lives of people, I have trust and belief that as an elected official, that's what you're going to carry forth on the city council. And you said a couple things that sparked to me when I think about just sort of civic engagement, which is so important broadly. Now, everybody's focused on this election. We got to vote, 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 vote. We need solid, visionary, American leadership from the top to the bottom. But then also we got to stay engaged. And you said that you recognize it as a business owner. The impact that issues have had, like COVID and others economically, community as an ANC commissioner on the emergency preparedness piece. And so now you see, we're in a position and a place where my knowledge and experience are the issues of the day. So now I can offer myself. And I think that is what the pathway to elected office should be, where folks see in this moment, I'm uniquely positioned because of my experience, and I now want to offer myself to go in to use this specific lens and perspective I have to make my community better, because not only it's a good time for me to get a 6-figure salary and be on boards and everybody know my name, but I actually get to bring about, impact of work that I've already been connected to.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that really is what it is. Some of the things I talk about is bringing back different pathways for our young people. Even at the middle school level, we've never done. My son used to say this: "Dad, what am I going to use this geometry? What am I going to use this science or whatever?" Helping them see, look, you know what? There's actually an application for this for your future. Keep them engaged in that this is not just rote memorization for a test, but there's something beyond that. And so we could do something creative like, okay, you take a whole week, take a half an hour at the end of the week and synthesize what you learned that week and say, okay, here's the kind of the careers that come out of those subject areas. And say, you have an opportunity here. If you're inspired and, motivated and interested in one of these, don't just say, it's for a test, don't forget about it, but think about what the next step is on that. Likewise, we have a system where you go into high school and 70% are not testing college ready. 70%. So what's the options for them? 0. There's no option. So it's either you go to college or you're bust. And we've been improving, sure, but about 3-4% a year. Well, if you take that number and keep going, it's going to take almost a decade. How many? And then 70,000 or 70% of the 50,000 students in public schools, that's a lot of students. That's a lot of students over the next 10 years that are not going to have an option. We can't wait that long. Mm-hmm. So I'm proposing, let's provide a variety of options in our schools. You got Amazon coming, you got Amtrak, you got the Airport Authority, you got all these big cranes. Can we not build a pipeline for them to have a career pathway as well as the college pathway?
So important. And I think, again, when we look at the landscape in the District of Washington, D.C., and the District of Columbia, but also nationally, and what issues are really pressing for our future. Because I've been saying to people, part of, I think, the challenge that we have with our institutional and political systems, Democrat and Republican, is what we're talking, why important, I think, when I'm talking to an independent candidate here, is that, our institutions are anchored in their survival very often. And as a result, they're pieces and issues that don't fall Democrat or Republican, but that fall on people, right? All people or sects of people that get lost, in the middle. And so having folks that recognize that the work and the service is about the timing of now, right? What are the issues impacting the people now, regardless of affiliation, regardless of some of these sort of other things? What are the issues now, and what's the type of leadership, that we need? It's great that if somebody has served 10, 20 years ago, or from my lens, I love all people and all families, but maybe you had kids in school 10, 20 years ago. Right. Wonderful. Your perspective is historically needed. They can call Council Member Chander and advise you, right? But you've been, as a business owner, as an ANC commissioner, as a parent, engaged in the landscape of what is happening in the now. And that excites me. And so what do you have to say for folks like yourself across the country or in other localities who are like you, been giving of themselves in community, been anchored in because it's the work that they are passionate about, they care about, and now they're sitting at the landscape going, okay, is this the time for me to step forward and offer myself? What do you have to say to other folks?
You know, that decision is just so hard to jump in, you know. The first time around, it's always the hardest, you know, but know in your heart why you're doing it. Okay. If you want to make a change and you know in your heart that you've got something unique to offer the greater community, you have a talent, a skill that's going to help better people. You know, I think that's what we're put here on this earth for, is to make people's lives, the people around us, better. And use that as your inspiration. Use that to say, you know what, I can have a greater impact beyond myself, beyond my immediate family, and that I can have a positive impact. And as soon as you say that, you're ready to go. And it's a matter of like taking that leap of faith and saying, it's going to be okay. You know, win or lose, it's going to be okay. And I speak about myself. As you know, there's 24 candidates in this race. Excuse me. And so so what are the odds? Well, we're in the top 3 or 4. So we have a good chance. Is it 100%? No. But, you know, for me, have I changed the conversation through this campaign? And I would say yes. You know, like the current council member is talking about converting buildings downtown into residences because, you know, a lot of these law firms aren't going to need those buildings. I brought that up. One of the other candidates really talking more about vocational education. I brought that up, and that's great. You know, thinking through how do we reimagine policing. You know, we held a whole town hall on that where we had hundreds of people tuning in to talk about it with the police, with the NAACP, with Guardian Angels. All these folks came together. And so those are the issues of our times, and we need to move that forward. You know, win or lose, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here. I'm going to fight for that because it's beyond me. It's beyond this election. And I'm super motivated to find solutions to the biggest challenges of our times. And I honestly believe that I have a role to play in that. And I'm going to do that part. I'm going to make my part and make my vision known and push for that so that we have a more just and equitable city.
Chander, thank you. Win or lose, we're going to be here. Win or lose, whoever wins, whoever loses. I tell people, I'm planning on being here. I've chosen to remain. I have no desire. I wear my mask every day. I'm not going anywhere. So win or lose, we're going to be here. And so if we're going to be here, so we got to be dialed in and connected. We got to be offering our skills, our knowledge, our experience so that we can move things forward in the ways that we can. Thank you for offering yourself. Thank you for the work that you've been doing, you know, in community and throughout your career. Thank you for offering yourself in this way to service. It's not easy. You know, I can't imagine a sea of, you know, 24, 25 folks, and you're trying to sort of break through that. But then also dealing with the politics and the landscape of it, and the fact that you stepped up, recognized you're a leader, took on the courage and said, I'm putting out here, going to put my ideas forth, and win or lose, we're going to be here. And so I think at the end of the day, if we all can be inspired by even just that foundational vision, we can actually really start to set a path forward. Before we close out, Chander, anything that you want to close out and say, particularly to our District of Columbia voters? I encourage you to consider Chander as one of your at-large city council member votes. You do get 2. Tell us where they can find you on the web, and anything you want to share with our DC voters before we close out.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, another plug-in. Remember, you have 2 votes in this race. You get to choose 2 candidates. And a couple things to clarify for some people. One, you know, it could be 2 independents. It doesn't have to be a Democrat. There's no seat, like it's not reserved for one party or another. The top 2 vote getters win the two seats. And so I encourage everyone to vote. Early voting starts next on the 27th. So that's coming up. If you've got your ballot in, vote on the ballot. I'm number 21, so you go down the list, but I'm there just to the left of the blank space on the bottom left. And here's my sign. It's chander2020.com. You can go there to find more information about me, or just call me directly if you have any questions. I always give out my number as an ANC Commissioner. I want to give it out to your folks. It's 202-546-2609. And I'm giving it to you now because you can have that number when I'm a council member too. So you can just call me up and say, hey, Chander, I need your help on this, because that's the kind of council member I'm going to be, with you, for you, and fight for you.
All right, everybody. Chander Jayaraman, candidate for at-large city candidate in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. I think you represent what our civic leaders, the direction our civic leaders should be moving in. I think you are a breath of inspiration and motivation for those out there like yourself who've been giving of themselves in community, working to solve problems, working to uplift the voices of those most vulnerable, who've now said, you know what, I'm going to offer myself to an elected service through our legislative institutions. And so if you're in Washington, D.C., please do check out Chander's campaign. If you haven't voted, you get 2 city council votes. I encourage you to consider Chander being one of those too. And if you're not in Washington, D.C., please be motivated and inspired to get involved in your community. Find ways. There's a problem that impacts you, something that you're passionate about. As Chander said, whether it can be from a stop sign to something to do with an alley or building some new type of residential, solving a housing affordability issue, you can play a part in solving problems in your community and making things better. Chander, again, thank you so much for joining us. I am Jeffrey Deshawn, the Inspired Muse, and this has been an episode of Hot Topics After Dark. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.